Now we have a panel discussion to finish up our day here. And the subject matter, of course, is four ways to a 4K finish. I'd like to start with Brian McMahon, because he hasn't been on camera yet. Brian's from Modern Video Film. He's a longtime colorist. And can you tell us about what you're doing at Modern and how you're handling 4K, the challenges and the benefits that it creates?
We've been working in 4K for quite a while in DCPs. We're doing a lot more in obviously UHD and HDR. And HDR is a challenge because it's new. There's a lot of gotchas in it. But 4K, just having the speed to do these things is a little difficult. Monitors is very difficult. Depending on, they're very touchy. Theatrical DCPs, they're great. They're beautiful, but we'll soon be doing HDR in that as well.
So you're saying the challenge is monitoring in 4K.
Monitoring in 4K.
If you're going to shoot in 4K, you really have to have a pretty big screen to be able to see the difference, right?
Yeah, if you have a good screen, if you're in a theater, you have a big screen, you can see the difference.
At a large facility like Modern, what's the percentage now that are finishing in 4K versus 2K?
A lot of things are still in 2K. It's probably still about 60 to 75% is 2K. But we're archiving pretty much everything, and especially on doing the restoration projects.
What kind of software are you using generally for your color correction?
Color correction, Resolve, monitoring. There's a whole different slew of things. We have Christie 4K projectors. We've got the new Sony EVM 300, X300 monitor. Monitoring, for UHD is a challenge. All the monitors are a little different. The off-axis is real touchy.
How have you seen Resolve, DaVinci, whatever you want to call it? How has it progressed over the years? It must have gotten a lot more tools now.
Yeah, it's got a lot more tools. We are on Resolve 12 now.
Now they're giving it away for free with the cameras? What do you think of that?
Yeah, but you need all the, it still costs you an arm and a leg to get it to run 4K real time.
All right, okay. That's an interest. I don't know that everybody knew that.
Yeah. I mean, we're on Linux systems.
It's the computing power that you need?
The computing power
to do everything live.
Yeah. You need the panels if you're going to be doing, a lot of it. You need the computing power. You need the monitoring. It's still, the software may be free, but it's not free to do.
All right. And let's turn it now over to Paul Evans from Daystrom. Paul, you gave a great presentation. Is there anything you can add to this conversation?
So when it comes to Resolve, I always wonder about the workflow in that I see a lot of facilities leveraging what we call Tier 2 storage better now. So we're talking about 4K finishing, which is generally Tier 1, whether it's on a desktop or whether it's on some big scale-out NAS system that can go, or SAN, that can go fast enough to keep up with your compute power and your real-time needs. That would be Tier 1. Tier 2 is the stuff that doesn't keep up with that, but it's the dumping ground for the stuff you're not working on, right? Nobody wants to delete anything, I've noticed, in this town. So it becomes a question of the workflow. How can the facility or just a small work group optimize a workflow so they don't have to spend a ton of money keeping a lot of content on Tier 1 and can start to use cheaper storage? That's where object storage is kind of handy, because object storage, being a simpler, dumber kind of storage at its core, can drive out a lot of costs. So if you have a large facility and you need a big dumping ground, that's a good place to try and steer towards. And there are big scale-out NAS systems now that really, at the end of the day, they have object technology behind them, but they just put up a nice front. So it's friendly to you and other mammals. So it just becomes a question of, what is my workflow? How cheaply can I get off trying to store data to keep up with the real-time needs? And if you're big enough, then you really want to get into automation so that you don't have 12 people moving content around. You've actually got the computers doing the work of the humans. That's a good strategy.
Paul, can I ask a question? At what point would you start to recommend the sort of solutions that you offer, like Ceph or stuff like that, as compared to a small work group? I mean, where's that changeover point? Regular SAN storage up to these more sophisticated object-based storage. Where is that transition point?
So a software solution like Ceph, which is a very dynamic object store and is really coming into its own in this year and next, tends to be more comfortable with racks of storage than one rack of storage, or even half a rack of storage. If you're below a rack of storage, RAID is still your friend, especially with a good parallel file system on top of it.
So how many racks you've got? Rack them up, and the more racks you got,
Or the middle ground would be a scale-out NAS, like an Isilon or a Cumulo, in which case you're just racking more in. And on the backside, it's doing an object-like thing, which means it never has to be shut down and can seamlessly scale. But the front-side protocols don't tend to be as fast with classic NAS.
classically, we've used an offline and online. I mean, either to handle data rates or to handle simply the throughput.
Yeah.
There are sort of secondary use where you want to be very much more mobile and away from your data store, where proxy is a different purpose. What is the intended workflow with Resolve, and why do you or do you not need proxies?
Okay. Me personally, as an editor, I cut offline, online transcoding and conforming out of my workflow, probably Adobe CS6, because I could cut raw R3D files and I didn't have to transcode. And so if you gave me and somebody else a hard drive at the same time, I'd have an assemble done by the time they're done transcoding. So moving forward, as Adobe got better at their game, Blackmagic has always been on the game as far as working with native files, because we come from the end side of things. So we're always at the end finishing. We can always connect to the conform. We always use the raw. So in a few recent projects, I've just cut a commercial, a music video, my own short film, and a camera test for one of the studios in town. All four of those productions were shot on raw, whatever flavor, whether it was Blackmagic or a Sony or a Red or an ARRI. And then I imported directly into Resolve on set. It went Camera Mag to my RAID, and then RAID to Resolve, and then Resolve to my timeline, edit, color, export out of Resolve, and I'm done. So me personally, with this workflow, I'm cutting offline out, I'm cutting online out, I'm cutting conform out. So I'm not only eliminating steps, because the technology's finally caught up. The only reason the offline-online workflow existed is because we didn't have fast storage, we didn't have fast graphics cards, we didn't have GPU leverage. So to be able to use fast storage and like a GPU, like a Titan X or something that has a lot of CUDA cores that can leverage GPU debayering on raw footage, which is a huge thing now, which Resolve does, is you can leverage OpenCL and OpenGL, and that allows you to do live debayering. So you're no longer transcoding for these proxies, you're doing a live proxy debayer. So I can have a 6K file and be editing in a quarter res proxy mode, which is a live debayer, which is what in past traditional terms, you would do a transcode to a lower res, which is a DNX36, 720 or 1080 or SD, do your edit, and then up res back to your high 4K, 6K file. So now I would just use that 6K file, but I'm looking at it in a live preview 1/4 debayer, do my edit, do my color, and then when I go to export, I just switch it back to full, and that's a one click. There's no reconform, there's no reconnecting files, and then exporting the full res file.
I'm guessing you're not working on a laptop.
Yeah, I've been, most of those productions that I've done have either been on my MacBook Pro or on that exact iMac over there.
So Chris, let's continue talking about hardware. You work for a hardware company. We've seen a lot of great tools. What kind of hardware do you need? What kind of processing power? What kind of computer do you need to keep up with the latest software?
Again, that's a big question. There's storage, there's RAM, there's processing power, there's graphics card, power that you're looking at nowadays, since software is actually starting to utilize all these different pieces, which is great. But when you're going to purchase a computer or going to upgrade a computer, you need to look at all of it too.
What if you want to cut 4K on your desktop? You want to shot a movie in 4K, you want to finish it in-house?
Well, a lot of it's going to be the storage, of course, which is going to be somewhat dependent upon the specific type of video you're working with and the software you're working with, because they have different mechanisms to allow you to handle the media, but you're still going to be looking at higher bit rates that are required for it in most cases. So you do need fast storage. And, if you're editing off your laptop, you need something fast that's like Thunderbolt nowadays. So, you really have this push and pull with storage and video kind of going hand in hand as far as how they're progressing along and developing.
Can I just jump in real quick and say I've never seen an industry that was so adept at moving the bar for storage technologists as cinema.
Yeah.
Because whatever we make to be what you wanted, then by the time we've done that, the bar gets moved.
And it's really the processors that are doing the heavy lifting, right? These systems.
Yeah, but also GPU is being
that's what I
leveraged heavily right now. And we're talking about 4K today. Get ready for virtual reality because that's 4K in each eye. And then how I'm doing a few virtual reality productions right now. And when you're looking at what they want to aim for, they want to aim for 8K each eye, 360 at 90 frames a second. So you'll have plenty of storage business.
Did you have any other questions, Phil? We just
I was
have
just
a few
asking,
minutes.
Chris, do you think there'll be a time when we see all SSD, all flash storage, or are we going to get spinning disks forever?
I think we're seeing a pendulum kind of swing a little bit.
Yeah.
Personally, I think maybe we're going to keep seeing hard disk spinning storage. I think it's another media type that can be utilized in the whole tiering of things.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still, for quality flash, there's still basically a 10x price. I mean, it keeps coming down, and y'all keep storing more. So it's the hard drive is 1/10 the price of the flash. Not nearly as fast, but it's not bad at streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put a big, powerful duck and a lot of ducks behind it, you're good.
Great.
And we have time for just
Oh,
a
you got
couple
all your ducks in a
questions if there are any from the audience.
USB versus Thunderbolt.
Thunderbolt, of course, if you got it. Well, Thunderbolt 3 would be the next one that's dropping is going to be 40 gigabyte per second bidirectional. So Thunderbolt or bitrate, and so Thunderbolt 1 was 10, Thunderbolt 2 is 20, Thunderbolt 3 is going to be 40. So USB 3 didn't even get to Thunderbolt 1.
And with 3.1 Gen 2, it's supposed to be 10 gig a second. Thunderbolt 3 is still going to be.
So that would be equivalent of Thunderbolt 1 still. So Thunderbolt 3 would still be quadruple the speed of that.
Behind the scenes of Thunderbolt, you basically have PCI. So Thunderbolt 3 moves to the PCIe 3.0 specification. So you can get into the game just using gigabit now, but when you have the budget or you're able to actually make the expense of upgrading your infrastructure, you can move over to something like Cat 6A or Cat 7 cables and get a 10G base T switch in there, which there's some low cost, like Netgear has a 10G base T switch starting at like under $1,000, I believe, so that you can get in there, and not completely bust your budget. Hopefully over time we see costs go down even more.
It just depends on if you're trying to share. So if it's a desktop system, Thunderbolt is really a better, simpler protocol for you. If you're going to be sharing across a network with multiple stations, and 10 gig and 40 gig are very economical. 40 gig, if you can stay within copper distances, is extremely economical, as long as you're buying the right one.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for the panel.